I remember that day vividly, sitting at the kitchen table in our sunny little home in Sunnyvale. The sun poured through the window, bathing everything in a warm glow, yet deep within me, I could feel a chill growing. It was like walking into a room filled with an icy breeze. I gazed out the window at the bright sky, the trees budding with new leaves, and the world outside seemed to be in perfect harmony, with neighbors smiling and children laughing. But inside our home, it felt like a storm was brewing in the very heart of my house and me. I sat there, staring at my notes, the words blurring together like a smudged painting of my future. With each tick of the clock, my anxiety grew thicker, more pronounced, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I could hear noises from the living room. Footsteps crossing the floor, my father's muffled grumble as he flipped through channels on the television. Then it happened. He marched into the kitchen, his brow furrowed like a storm cloud. I could see his chin tilting up slightly, mouth pressed into a thin line that foretold the thunder approaching. "Harper, you need to pull yourself together. This is your future we are talking about," he shouted, his voice booming like an explosion reverberating off the walls. I flinched at the sound, the force of his words sending a ripple of fear through me, a chilling reminder that I had brushed aside my responsibilities for too long. His disappointment and frustration filled the air, a palpable force that bore down on me like winter snow pressing branches to the ground. "Dad, I know I'm trying," I said, my voice small, desperate to bridge the widening gap between us. I just need some time." But he was unmoved, poised like a soldier ready for battle, not one to yield an inch in his demands. "Time? How much time do you need? You're wasting it. This test, your future, could change everything if you let it." His words came out in a rush, each one cutting sharper than the last. The agony behind them was almost unbearable. It felt like he was throwing daggers, and each one found its mark, their aggression seeping into my skin and burrowing deep. I shrank further into my chair, my heart pounding loudly in my ears. I could feel my hands tremble slightly, an involuntary response to his volcanic eruption. How had we gone from discussing my studies to this explosive confrontation? There was a time not long ago when I could talk to him about anything, but now my voice felt like a whisper in a roar. "But Dad, the more you shout, the less I can focus," I said, hoping to calm him down, hoping he would understand that my procrastination felt more like a weight than a choice I made. He leaned forward, his hands splayed on the table, his eyes locking onto mine with a fierce intensity. "This is not just some assignment, Harper. This is your life. You act like you have all the time in the world, but you don't. You are going to regret this later, mark my words." His voice echoed off the walls of our cozy kitchen, now feeling more like a battleground than a place of safety. "You think I want this? That I like disappointing you?" I asked, a glimmer of defiance creeping into my voice. I realized only afterward how much strength it took to stand up to him, even in my confusion and fear. The second I spoke, I could see the shift in his demeanor, the way his jaw clenched tighter. "Do not put this back on me, Harper. I am not the one failing. I am not the one throwing away a chance for a bright future." Now it was my turn to feel the anger bubbling inside me, forming a knot in my throat. "I said I will study, but you just keep yelling. All it does is make me want to crawl under my bed and hide." I shot back, defiance morphing into desperation, the adrenaline pumping through my veins, making me feel alive in that tense moment, even as I felt the urgency to retreat. His eyes softened for a fleeting second, revealing a glimpse of the father I once knew, but the moment quickly vanished, replaced by the hard shell he had embraced. "Fine, hide all you want, but don't expect me to bail you out when the time comes. You need to take responsibility for your own actions." His words turned to ice, freezing the air around us and making it almost impossible to breathe. For a heartbeat, time froze, leaving us suspended in our mutual disappointment. "I just feel like you don't understand how hard this is for me," I whispered. I had opened my heart in that moment, exposing every fear and insecurity, but I feared that I had wasted my breath on a deaf audience. He didn't see me, he saw his expectations, his unfulfilled visions projected onto me, and that was all. He stood up, banging his hand against the table, which startled me enough that I nearly knocked over my glass of water. "That is because you refuse to face reality. 10 days of this? I thought you were more mature than this, that you would rise to the occasion. But now I realize I was wrong." With those final words, he turned on his heel and strode out of the kitchen, leaving me there, consumed by uncertainty. Suddenly, the house felt eerily silent, just the ticking of the clock punctuating the stillness, matching the pounding in my head. I was left with nothing but the remnants of anger and disappointment swirling around me, each thought battling the other as I tried to make sense of it all. I gulped back a wave of emotions. Why did we always have to fight? Why couldn't he understand that I was just trying to find my way? Days turned into an uncomfortable silence, 10 days to be precise, and I counted every hour like marks on a prison wall. The silence stretched endlessly, curving around us like barbed wire, sharp and restrictive. In that time, my father became a ghost in our house, floating through the rooms without really being present. I could sense the dizziness of his isolation seep into every corner, the way his footsteps were quieter, his shoulders slumped, and his voice, a hushed whisper even when he occasionally spoke. He rarely uttered a word to anyone, including my mom, who began to worry deep into her bones. It was maddening, the way we both tiptoed around each other, like two strangers forced to coexist in a home once filled with laughter and stories. I missed my dad, but more than that, I felt a looming fear of his hostility. Each icy glare felt like a flaming dart shooting through me. I wanted to open a conversation, to thaw out the frost that hung in the air, but every time I tried, his annoyance and biting words pushed me right back into the shadows of silence. I watched him at the dinner table, his usually hearty appetite replaced with little more than a few bites here and there. He would sit across from me, staring into the distance instead of the food on his plate. My mom tried to bridge the gap, her gentle comments tending to die out swiftly when he would respond with curt nods or grumbled replies that signaled his desire for solitude rather than family. "Are you okay?" I would venture, and each time my heart raced as if I were tiptoeing across a pit of sharp rocks, waiting for him to snap. The silence would stretch afterward, wrapping us in an invisible cocoon suffocating in restraint, tension, and unspoken words. "Yeah," he would respond, curt and emotionless, and then turn his gaze back to the wall where a picture of our family hung from happier times. It was like we were both living in a haunted house of emotions, filled with shadows of despair and fear. I ached for him, longing for the warmth of that father daughter connection we had once shared, but now we were nothing more than strangers, stuck in an uncomfortable truce. I was drowning amidst our stormy silence, desperately hoping that, somehow, some way, he would come back to me. But each passing day felt like a month, the tension straining our spirits, threatening to snap like a taut bowstring. I found myself retreating, taking refuge in the quiet of my room, where the chaos could remain just a thought in the distance. But thoughts often turn dark when roaming alone. The nights became the hardest, filled with shadows dancing on my walls that animated my fears, turning them into monsters that gnawed at the edges of my mind. The weight of it all pressed down on me, and I knew that something would have to change. I wished for an end to our silence, praying for the strength to reach out one more time, to pull the threads of our unwoven bond back together. Because as long as we were trapped in this cycle of animosity and detachment, I couldn't help but wonder, what would it take for him to understand? What would it take for us to find our way back to each other amidst the icy expanse of our home? The days dragged like a heavy fog settling over everything. I walked through my house, and it felt like I was wandering through a forgotten ghost town, every room a reminder of the vibrant life that once pulsed within these walls. Shadows pooled in the corners where laughter used to dance, where light moments formed the fabric of our family. Now, that family felt entire disconnected. My father had shut himself off like a clam locked tight, refusing to show even the faintest glimmer of light. He would sit at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his cup of coffee, as if the world outside was a separate entity he no longer wished to engage with. My mother fluttered around him, attempting to coax some semblance of communication, but each attempt fell flat, and I could see how it wore her down, her brow furrowing into a permanent frown with worry etched deep into her face. "Harper, have you seen your father today?" she asked one morning, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. I glanced towards the hall where he retreated but chose to shake my head, a hollow thud echoing in my chest. "No, Mom, he's still in his room," I replied. I could feel the weight of her hopeful gaze on me, expecting me to somehow be the bridge between the two fractured worlds we now lived in. But I was as lost as she was, trapped in the shadow whirlpool created by my father's silence. It was 10 long days of solitude. Each second felt like a drum echoing louder than the last, marking the passing time in this wound that refused to heal. My phone had become a part of me, an attachment that had remained away from me, like a locket whose clasp had broken, leaving its owner without comfort. When I finally had it returned, I held it in my hand, its surface smooth and familiar. It gleamed beneath the light, a portal to a world beyond these walls, a flicker of hope. But instead of reaching out to friends or finding comfort in their company, I opened social media. With trembling fingers, I began plotting my revenge against the emptiness that devoured our home. I had decided that if my father wanted to feel isolated, then I would give him isolation, the isolation he had dished out to me. I took pride in showcasing my life, the moments he would miss. I went to the park with friends, the sun flowing over us like warm honey. I captured every moment, laughter bubbling over as we posed for pictures, arms wrapped around each other, grins wide enough to eclipse the sun. "Say cheese," I called out, snapping a picture of us squished together, everyone erupting in laughter. Each click felt alive, electric. I shared it with my followers, and when I peered back at my profile, it was bursting with brightness, contrasting the darkness that had engulfed my home. At dinner one evening, I could not resist slipping the phone closer to my father, who sat rigidly at the table, picking at his food. Look, Dad, I went to the lake with Sophia and Ethan last weekend, I said cheerfully, hoping to draw him in. He grunted in response without looking up. My mother gave me a look of caution, a silent warning that I was treading a thin line. Yet I felt emboldened, fueled by an anger that came from feeling unseen. I scrolled through the pictures I had uploaded, smiling faces, joyous moments painted against a backdrop of summer happiness. Each post was a needle, inserted precisely into the fabric of his indifference, a way to pierce through the walls he had erected around himself. I never dreamed it would hurt him. I just wanted him to understand the gaping void his absence had created in my life. A few weeks passed this way, and instead of mending the connection between us, the distance expanded like a chasm I was afraid we could not cross. Even as I cultivated relationships with friends and shared laughs with them, my heart felt heavy. Each message I sent was a scream into the void, hoping for a response. In the silence, I started to feel powerful, realizing that I had control over the narrative of our lives. I wanted to show my father he could not simply withdraw into his pain without paying a price. I hadn't foreseen how fast the whole thing would spiral, though. It was troubling, this game I had begun unwittingly. And then, unexpectedly, it became a lifeline in my loneliness. One evening, as I huddled in a blanket on the couch scrolling through my notifications, an unexpected ping came through. It was a call from my grandmother. Her name lit up on my screen like a small beacon. Harper, darling. Voice buzzed through the phone, wrapping around me like a warm hug. How have you been? Hey, Grandma, I've been okay, I said, trying to sound as upbeat as possible, but I could hear the quaver in my own voice. Things have been rough. Oh, sweetie, I can hear it in your voice. Is it your father again? She asked gently. My throat tightened at the question. Yeah, I replied, gazing blankly at the wall, which felt like it was closing in, its paint peeling ever so slightly in response to my anguish. He just he doesn't talk to me, it's like he's a ghost. Have you tried reaching out to him? She prompted softly, concern lacing her every word. I tried, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. But he just ignores me. I understand, Harper. You know your father loves you, even if he doesn't show it right now. He's dealing with his own pain. But you must know how much he misses you, too, she said, coaxing me to see that maybe the wall wasn't entirely my father's making. I thought about it, weighing her words as I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I guess, but it feels so one-sided. I'm tired of being the only one reaching out. Maybe you both just need time. You will find your way back to each other again, I promise you that, she reassured me. Her words held a gentle truth that wrapped around my heart, but they were also sneaky, worming their way into my mind, transforming my bitter resolve. I found myself sharing more with her in those conversations, revealing my dreams, my passions, and my frustrations. I decided to take up painting again, I said one day, hoping to create a new foundation of warmth to mend the rips that threatened to pull us apart. It's like therapy for me. Art is a wonderful escape, she said, her voice sparking enthusiasm through the line. You must show me what you've created. Maybe I should send you my old paints, sweetheart. Yes, that would be amazing. I realized how much better I felt just by talking to her, the connection easing the tightness in my chest. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, anchoring my sailboat of emotions amidst a turbulent sea. Yet, in the shadows, my father lingered just out of view. I imagine he felt me slipping away, sensed from under the weight of his own anger that his daughter was creating a life untouched by his darkness. He may have been lurking, but I could see him growing increasingly distant, hunched at the edges of every quiet moment at home. He was a specter drifting through our lives as I became more immersed in my world, leaving him behind. I caught glimpses of him, watching from the corners as I reveled in my small victories, celebrating birthday parties and spontaneous hangouts. I could almost feel the resentment radiating from him. It was thick like the air before a storm. I had moments where I felt smug, thinking I had gained an upper hand. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he was missing, to see the joy he was pushing away. I felt triumphant, believing I was playing puppeteer to his heart. But the happiness I indulged in came with an undercurrent of impending turmoil. The farther I traveled into this uncharted territory of revenge, the more uncertain I felt, as if I were building my fortress on a cliff without realizing how shaky the ground beneath me truly was. With each shared photograph, each gleeful status update, I pushed him further away, convinced that I was forcing his hand, that eventually he would reach out, his regret spilling over like a broken dam. But the deeper I probed into this abyss, the more I sensed something was brewing beneath the surface. My father's anger simmered, a storm gathering the dark clouds above. Little did I know, my actions would soon awaken a sleeping giant, ready to unleash his fury in a way that would shake our fragile existence to its core. The realization lingered at the edge of my mind, the foreboding whisper that warned me I was dancing a dangerous waltz on the brink of chaos. Only the melody was one I dared not ignore. Unaware of how much the notes would soon shift into dissonant despair, the air was thick with unspoken words, heavy as fog rolling over hills at dawn. I could sense the tension radiating through the living room, pulsating in rhythm with my racing heartbeat. The silence felt like a live wire, crackling and ready to snap, and it unnerved me in ways I never thought possible. I had spent weeks avoiding the confrontation that had been looming over us like a great storm cloud, simmering with unsaid phrases and unacknowledged pain. My father had finally reached the breaking point, and there he stood, his silhouette framed against the fading light from the window, his broad shoulders tense, fists clenched at his sides. "Harper, why are you choosing to shut me out?" he demanded, his voice slicing through the silence, heavy with confusion and regret. Each word emerged like a challenge, tainted by the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, a raw energy that echoed my own frustrations. I could see the tension in his face, the way his jaw tightened, and I wondered if he even recognized how much hurt lay hidden under his temper. I felt a rush of heat spill over me, igniting the fire that had been flickering deep within my chest. It was time to let it out. For far too long, I had carried the weight of disappointment wrapped around my heart like a heavy chain, and I had felt like I was living in a shadow. This was my chance to free myself, to shake loose those shackles and speak my truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might feel. "Do you even know how much your anger pushes me away?" I shouted, the words bursting forth like a dam breaking. My heart raced, and I could feel the warmth of tears pooling at the corners of my eyes, yet I wouldn't let them fall just yet. "I mean it, it shakes me to my core." Each syllable trembled with an intensity fueled by a mix of fear and fierce vulnerability. The silence that followed felt like it caught on something sharp, drawing out our raw emotions into the open. As I looked into his eyes, I saw confusion morph into realization, the storm cloud above him beginning to shift. My words hung in the air like a dense fog, and I watched as he processed my outburst, his expression morphing under the pressure of those unfiltered feelings. I continued, needing him to truly hear me, to see the damage that had been inflicted upon our once happy home. "You have turned our home into a place filled with sorrow. I feel like a ghost, invisible and unheard." I could feel the tears slipping down my cheeks now, the warmth trailing down my face as I spoke my heartache. I tried to reach out, but all I found was your coldness. The room pulsated with a palpable tension as all the unsaid words cascaded between us like a waterfall. I could see something shift inside him, a crack forming in the tough shell he had created. He stood unmoving for a heartbeat, then a flicker of understanding spread across his features, pushing the anger to the back like forgotten seaweed on the shore. I watched as a veil began to lift, revealing the vulnerable person he had once been. It was a little like opening a rusted door that had not been turned in years. His expression softened ever so slightly, the harsh lines of frustration melting into something more akin to sorrow, and I could finally see the father I had loved underneath all that rage. "I never wanted to push you away," he murmured, his voice shaking as he took a step closer, bridging that emotional chasm that had stretched wide between us for far too long. It felt like a fragile thread connecting us, both of us gripping it desperately, afraid to let go, but unsure if we could hold on. I don't know how to deal with everything," he admitted, looking down as if the room itself held the answers. I was angry at everything, my job, the bills, the constant weight of failure, but it made me blind to what I was doing to you, to us. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I felt a response unfurling in my chest. It was like I had taken a breath after being submerged underwater for what felt like eternity. I had fought so hard to make him see, to make him understand the torment I felt within our home, and it felt like a floodgate had cracked open between us. "You don't even know how isolating that is, Dad." I burst out, my voice rising again, but this time it wasn't from anger, it was from a passionate plea. "Every time you yelled, every time you turned away, it just pushed me further into a corner. I felt like I was screaming underwater and you couldn't hear me, like I didn't matter at all." He flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop now. I needed him to grasp the depths of my despair, to understand that this wasn't just about anger. This was about love, about wanting to belong to a family instead of drifting through the spaces left between us. "You may not have meant to hurt me, but your anger was like a dark cloud over everything. It made every little thing unbearable. I hesitated to even breathe because I was afraid of how you might react." Tears fell freely now, the weight of my sorrow finally breaking the surface as I spoke. The sight of me visibly upset moved him, flickering with emotion as I could see him digest my pain. "I should have done better," he said suddenly, voice hoarse, almost cracking. His gaze was devouring me, searching for the right words to say or perhaps to fix the world we had been living in like fierce waves crashing against the shore. I should have listened. I thought being strong meant tolerating it all. That rage somehow made me better. But all I did was push the people I love farther away. The sincerity in his voice made my heart ache more than it already did. There was a humbled honesty wrapped around his confession, one that begged for a path forward. It felt like for the first time, he was finally letting me in, peeling back layers of his anger, revealing the broken man beneath. As I took a breath, the weight of the moment washed over me like the comforting warmth of sunlight after a cold winter's day. I don't need perfection, Dad, I whispered, hoping my voice radiated the understanding I felt deep inside. I just need you. I need to know you care enough to work on us with me. His eyes glistened, catching the last light of day, and for the first time I felt like I existed in that moment. We were standing there together, no longer just father and daughter locked in a battle of hurt, but two wounded souls longing for connection. He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking to almost nothing. I promise I will try. I will do everything to earn back your trust. I don't want to lose you, he said softly, his voice breaking into that unrecognizable emotional territory. There was a sincere urgency to his words, a raw vulnerability that pulled at my heartstrings. As I looked into his eyes, I could finally see the glimmers of the father I had once known, the laughter, the tickling, the late night stories at bedtime, shining through the dense fog of anger. It was like the dawn breaking after what felt like the longest night. Hope began to unfurl inside me, comforting and light, even in the face of the uncertainty we still faced. I want to believe you, I whispered, the fear still swirling within but now tempered by a flicker of hope. But it's going to take time. All the time in the world, he promised, and I could feel the warmth of that promise wrapping around us. I'm ready to start if you will. Standing there in that softly lit room, I began to see the doorway opening, the first crack toward healing, toward understanding for both of us. The tide of my resentment ebbed away like a fading storm, and although our journey would be long, hope had finally intertwined our destinies once more. We were on the edge of something new. A fragile yet beautiful beginning days turned into weeks, and slowly, the tension that once filled our home began to dissipate. It was a gradual transformation, like the fading of a long storm. I often found myself pausing to take it in, the subtle shifts in mood and atmosphere around the house. My father, now aware of how his anger had affected us, started to make small but significant changes. I could feel the air lightening, the heaviness lifting, and I found myself hesitating, wondering if this was a fragile shell of progress or the beginnings of something real. One evening after dinner, I caught his eye and noticed for the first time in ages that it held warmth instead of cool indifference. Harper, can we talk for a minute? He asked, breaking through the barrier of silence that had grown thicker than the walls of our home. The words hung in the air, charged with anticipation. I nodded, my stomach flipping, half excited, half anxious. We ventured into the living room, the soft glow of the table lamp surrounding us like a gentle embrace. The conversations we used to have felt like they belonged to another lifetime, but here we were, stepping into a new chapter. Been thinking a lot about how I have treated you, my father began, his voice steady yet softer than I remembered. I realized that my anger, it was a shield I held up, thinking I was protecting you when I only pushed you away. I felt a rush of gratitude mingled with disbelief. Thank you for saying that, I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. It was hard to see you that way. My father nodded, allowing a deep breath to escape, a tangible release of the burden he had carried for so long. He continued, I want to be better, Harper. I don't want to create distance between us anymore. What do you feel I can do to make that happen? A flurry of emotions rolled through me, relief, hope, even fear. The chain of anger that bound us felt like it was beginning to rust, hints of freedom glimmering on the edges. Maybe we could try talking more about stuff that's bothering us, you know? Like how you feel when I get angry? Yes, I answered, surprised at my own bravery. And about school and friends, things that matter to me. I want to tell you about my life, no more hiding. I watched as a spark ignited in his eyes, something that resembled pride mixed with sadness. In that moment, the silence that had haunted our meals, slicing through the air like a knife, began to transform into a medium of connection. For the first time in years, our conversations did not feel like a showdown. They became more of a weaving together of understanding. As we embarked on this journey of healing, the tentative smiles we exchanged became brighter, filled with a growing warmth. There was one night when we were playing a board game, a ridiculous game filled with quirky questions that made us laugh and groan at the absurdity. Okay, if you could have dinner with any famous person, dead or alive, who would it be? I asked, leaning forward, eager to see what he would say. I would say maybe Albert Einstein. That guy was brilliant, and I bet he had some wild ideas about life, he responded with a smirk. Einstein? I teased, eyes sparkling. You just want to make me feel dumb. No, no, hear me out, he chuckled, moving his game piece closer. Imagine the stories he could tell. Plus, I could ask him how to solve my math equations. Good luck with that, but I would love to have dinner with Anne Frank. I would want to know how she managed to stay hopeful in such dark times. His smile faded slightly, and I wondered if he could see the angle of my thoughts. That would be powerful, he said, leaning back. Sometimes it feels like the world is overshadowed by anger and fear, doesn't it? But we're pushing through that, I said, my voice firm yet gentle. Our relationship is improving, and we have a chance to break free from that darkness. His nod confirmed that he understood, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Each step he took toward healing made me realize that no matter how strained our relationship had become, there was still a path to redemption. It felt like we were standing at the beginning of a beautiful hike, with the trail unspooling before us, full of promise. Yet as days turned into weeks, I discovered that it wasn't just my father making adjustments. I was learning to transform as well. I experimented with speaking my mind and being honest about my feelings, even when it was hard. Shared my troubles at school, the pressure of insisting on grades, and the toll of friendships that sometimes felt more like a balancing act than a support system. I don't want to be just a daughter to you or an obligation, I said during one of our dinners, pasta and garlic bread setting the stage. I want to be my own person, someone you are proud of, not someone you wish to mold into your expectations. He paused for a second, his fork hovering above his plate. I've thought about that too. Sometimes the things I wanted for you, good grades, being the best in everything, made me blind to who you are actually becoming. I blinked, allowing his words to sink in. So you are saying you will trust me more, that I can decide my own paths without feeling the pressure? Yes, I want you to be who you are meant to be, he replied, emotion thickening his voice. Our common ground began to rebuild itself, small pieces falling into place little by little. I discovered that my father's anger was not just a dark cloud, but something rooted in his own fears and struggles as well. Each conversation felt like we were forging new foundations upon the ground of vulnerability. Then came a Saturday afternoon when I suggested a small outing together, something that felt so simple yet filled with sweet nostalgia. Let's go to that amusement park, just like the old days, I suggested, my heart racing, tinged with excitement and fear. You know when we used to ride the Ferris wheel and eat cotton candy? He smiled softly, a reminiscent look crossing his face. You remember that time we got stuck at the top for what felt like an eternity? You were screaming and laughing the whole time. I thought we were going to fall, I laughed, an easy sound pouring out of me. But it was fun. I just want to make more memories like that. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. All right then, let's do it. I will take you just like before. That Saturday felt like pure magic. The sun sparkled, the sky was a bright blue, and as we walked through the amusement park, I felt as though we were gliding through the past. Laughter bounced off the walls of our home again, and I couldn't stop the grin that plastered itself across my face as we screamed on roller coasters and indulged in everything sugary. After riding the Ferris wheel, we shared a giant funnel cake, and I slid the plate between us, dusted with powdered sugar. This is the best thing I have tasted all day, he confessed, smiling as he took another bite. I could eat this forever. Not a chance, I grinned. That cake will disappear before you finish. Remember, I get to claim at least half. As we leaned into the moment, I began to see the transformation happening in both of us. The laughter, the understandings we forged, the stories we shared. As we drove home, the sun dipping low in the sky, painting everything in shades of pink and orange, I felt a warmth spreading through me. It feels good, doesn't it? He said, looking at me sideways with an approving nod. Yes, it feels like we are starting fresh, really fresh. In that car ride, I allowed myself to envision a brighter future. Like the sun setting but promising to rise again the next day, I felt hopeful about our lives together. I could hardly keep track of the ways we were changing with each other. But little did I know that the true test of our newfound relationship was still approaching, lying just around the corner, waiting to challenge everything we had worked so hard to fix. As I rode the wave of enjoyment and relief, the undercurrent of anticipation hung in the air like an impending storm, ominous yet uncertain. Desires danced in my heart, yet that subtle warning whispered of tests that would arise, revealing just how deep our healing truly ran. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that.